Great. So we're just going to allow just another moment or two for folks to arrive and settle in. So welcome, welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Always a pleasure to practice together. There you go. And so this evening is Tuesday Tune In, and as usual, we're gonna do some things differently today, but we're going to more or less follow the usual program. And that means that we're going to begin with a bit of a sit, a guided sit, and then we'll move on to the Dhamma talk and then some Q&A. So this evening, I think this evening we're gonna try a meditation on feeling tone, on finding the pleasant and unpleasant and neutral sensations in the body. So, but before we do that, we're gonna first establish our posture, and then in an unusual twist, we're gonna look at the mind first before we settle into the body part, into the feeling tone part. So I like to begin with just rocking the body from side to side and front to back, maybe turning the head. Loosening up. Really sensing the body settling on your seat. Relaxing the belly and really being present right here, right now, for this body, in this place. And allowing the back and the spine to come into an upright posture. Softening the eyes, softening the mouth. Placing the hands wherever they're comfortable. And now turning to the mind. So just having a look at the mental activity of this moment. Just observing thought. And staying curious with the mind. How is it in this moment? What thoughts or qualities are you experiencing in the mind? Thoughts like leaves on a river or a stream, just passing through. And now we're going to move that sense of observation, that one who looks, and begin to move through the body, just noticing parts of the body that feel pleasant or unpleasant. Or maybe they feel neutral. Maybe you don't find either pleasant or unpleasant. But I'm going to go starting from the crown of the head. And without too much detail, just sort of moving the attention downward. Beginning to move the attention downward. Just noticing any places that are pleasant or unpleasant. And just slowly moving down through the head. Also noticing if there's anything that's mostly neutral. Moving down through the neck. Slowly, slowly. Continuing downward. Just noticing places that feel pleasant or places that feel unpleasant. Continuing downward through the body. Maybe by this point, arriving at the hips. And still moving slowly downward. Unpleasant or pleasant. Or maybe just neutral, maybe just missing any kind of feeling. Eventually arriving at the feet. And then again, one more pass, starting at the feet and moving upward. Just observing whatever feeling tones you notice. And you move slowly up through the body. Moving upward very slowly, like taking a flashlight. Just looking at each area, pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. Maybe arriving again in the head, moving all the way up through the crown of the head, aware of the feeling tones. And now we're going to turn back to the mind and see if you can observe the mental activity in the same way. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Just noticing what tones come along with those thoughts. Staying curious about the mental experience. Just noticing the tones that are present. Noticing the thoughts that are present in the mind. The feeling tones of pleasant or unpleasant or neutral with those thoughts. And perhaps also noticing that some of those thoughts are also the same sensations and perceptions of the body. Similar perceptions of the body. Now, in these last few moments of the meditation, I'm going to check in on one other quality, another dimension of mind. So just observing without judgment, just noticing whether the mind feels broad or whether the mind feels constrained. Is it big or is it small? Mind of this moment. All right, my friends, that was our meditation practice for this evening. And a little different than usual. So if you have any comments or questions about that, we'll take them at the end of the Dhamma talk. But for now, go ahead and adjust in whatever way feels appropriate for shifting to this next part of the program. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So today here in the United States and perhaps in other parts of the world, we're celebrating Valentine's Day. And because of it's Valentine's Day, then it seemed to me appropriate to talk about Metta, to talk about loving kindness. And yeah, there's so much, it's like hard to even know where to begin with the teaching of loving kindness, but we'll start somewhere. So the the teaching, so the Pali word for loving kindness is metta, and metta is one of 4 practices that are said to be the heavenly dwellings or the divine abidings. And I'll say more about why that is later, but suffice to say that this word metta, translated as loving kindness, or sometime Bhante Gunaratana, a monk who recently wrote a book about this practice, recently meaning about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, likes to translate as loving friendliness, right? Because this word metta is related to mitta, which means friend. And I think that gives it a flavor, gives us a taste of it. But for me, friendliness feels like it doesn't go quite far enough. I like to often translate it as universal kindness, so that we don't get too tangled up in the idea of it being any kind of romantic or passionate loving. It's much more. It's much less, what could you say? Much more universal than that, much less discerning than that. It applies, metta said to apply to everyone. And it's said to be like the sun at midday, like the sun that shines on everything, very bright quality of mind. It's not so much an emotional state as it is really an intentional quality of mind that can be brought forth. And that's very important, that we understand the practice of metta in whatever form you're doing it. I'm going to speak a little bit about different forms, but that we understand the practice of metta as relating very strongly to intention. Intention and attention, and how we work with those two factors to really bring forth, to start with something very mundane, something that we can experience in everyday life, and then grow it into something that is what the Buddha referred to as a practice that can bring immeasurable liberations of the mind. That the practices, all four of these practices, the Brahma Viharas, are the immeasurable liberations of the mind. So it's a very, very powerful practice, and it's something that we see over and over again in the early discourses, and then taken up later as part of compassion practice in the Mahayana, I believe. And when we apply the practice of metta and we apply some investigation, the metta can bring forth the other 6 factors of awakening and really can truly take you to the culmination of the path. You have to add in the investigation because the metta doesn't necessarily bring that along with it. But metta will bring or will cultivate the other 6 factors besides investigation, and those are mindfulness, joy, energy, and I'm doing them out of order here. Mindfulness, energy, joy, tranquility, and concentration or immersion, and equanimity. So those are the kinds of qualities that we can see will come along with the metta practice when it gets strong, when it gets powerful. And mind you that the Buddha prescribed metta as a practice, and the other great practitioners of that time prescribed metta not just for folks who were advanced practitioners, but also for beginners. You see, it really recommended across the spectrum of experience within the Dharma. And yes, and a good example of that is So there's a very interesting sutta where the Buddha was visiting an area of India where they had a lot of teachers passing through, and the people that lived there were called the Kalamas actually. And they asked, they said, oh, different folks come through here, and we're confused about who's actually speaking the truth. And he spoke to them about really sort of understanding different spiritual practices that would lead to more greed, hatred, and delusion, or to less greed, hatred, and delusion. And he said, when you find those spiritual practices that lead to less greed, hatred, and delusion, then you should practice those. You'll know for yourself. And then he immediately taught them the loving kindness meditation. That was the very first form of meditation that he taught to the Kalamas. And then he also teaches loving kindness meditation as a way of developing these very, very deep states of concentration, or what I like to call immersion or absorption of the mind. Very ways of having the mind become very still and very clear and focused. So the question really is how to take up this practice, because maybe our minds aren't feeling quite so kind, or quite so loving, or quite so vast, or quite so clear and bright. Maybe that's not accessible right away. Or maybe it is with, in very specific situations, but then it's harder to bring into other situations. So this idea of really being able to universalize it is important. And I think part of what we can aspire to when we work on this practice. But you don't have to start out with that kind of a mind. In fact, I would say, just talking very practically speaking about the two different forms of metta. So the first form of metta that I'm going to talk about is this sort of a recitation. May all beings be well. That's the general sentiment of metta. May beings be well. May I be well. May you be well. May we be well. May my family, my people in my country, and so on. And that is derived from a text called the Sutta Nipata, where we find the discourse on loving kindness, the Karaniya Metta, and Metta Sutta, Karaniya Metta Sutta. There's a backstory about that in the commentaries. I haven't seen it in the discourses. It could be in there, but I haven't seen it. But the backstory comes from the commentaries. And the backstory of this teaching, this way of reciting metta and really beginning to think about beings in this way and establishing one's intention through stating it, through really reminding yourself aloud, verbally, is that there was a group of practitioners, a group of monastic practitioners, and they'd gone to this big forest. This forest that was very famous for having these big, beautiful trees. And it's said that there were some beings in this forest that were living in the trees. And when the monks moved in, at first they were okay with accommodating them because they thought they were only going to be there for a day or two. But the monks decided they were going to be there for a while. So they would sit at the foot of the trees and they would meditate. And the other beings in the forest weren't so happy about this and started to harass them. So these are described as being beings like ghosts, or what we might think of as ghosts or beings of that nature, spirits of some sort. And they were scared. They were really being scared. They were really scared by these creatures that were bothering them there in the forest. And they were so scared that they couldn't meditate. So they went back to the Buddha and they said, okay, what should we do about this? We want another place to stay. And the Buddha said, no, go back to that same place and recite this. Remind yourself of your intention of goodwill or well-being toward any kind of being. And if you do that and you develop that heart and that quality in your mind, then you'll be able to be there. And they'll also sense that. And so it's an interesting teaching, because whether or not you believe in that type of being, the teaching that the Buddha was offering was, right, if you establish this quality in yourself, then whatever kinds of beings that you're interacting with, whether they're favorable to you or not, will have some sense of that, will actually be able to have either a direct or maybe perhaps an indirect sense of that. So metta is said to not only nourish our own hearts and minds, but also to improve our relationships with other people, right? And that makes sense. If you're coming from a place that's more bright, that's more kind, that's more loving, that's more open, then it's easier to have relationships with people. So that's one of the ways that it's described. And so for that reason, metta is often said to be a very good practice for fear, to counter anxiety and fear in us, right? So it's teaching the mind another way of relating to the world that's not based in fear. So that's one of the ways that metta is understood. And so in the Metta Sutta, you have, may all beings be well and happy, may beings be at peace and at ease. And there's this kind of description. So just as a mother protects her only child with her life, so should one have a boundless heart of metta, of wishing well-being toward other beings. So oftentimes it's people come up with some phrases that work for them. And I want to say that the key to this kind of metta is to not try to force yourself into saying something that isn't true for you, right? If you don't really feel compassion or rather metta, well-wishing, goodwill toward all beings, then don't say that. But if your intention is to feel that, then you could say, oh, okay, may all beings be well. That's my intention. I may not be able to fully act upon that at that moment, but if that is truly an intention that I have and that I want to foster, then you could, right, by virtue of that, recite that. Or maybe you just start with yourself. May I be well. For some people, starting with the self is harder, and starting with the world is easier. For other people, starting with the world is harder. Starting with the self is easier. So you have to kind of see where you land there. Over the course of 17 years or so that I've been doing metta on a daily basis, I have to say sometimes it's been in one of those camps or the other. Or you can start with somebody that's easy, or your pet, right? It's very good to start with folks that are easy or beings that are easy for you. Then maybe you can move on to cockroaches and all kinds of beings that could use your well-wishing. When I first moved into this place where the vihara is now here in Alexandria, Virginia, it's just a small townhouse. And when I first moved into this place a year ago, November, so not that long ago, there were some palmetto bugs. Palmetto bugs are not cockroaches, but they look exactly like cockroaches, but twice the size. And there was a couple of palmetto bugs that had gotten in, and I saw this palmetto bug at here I am by myself. It's the night, and I walk into the hallway, and there's this enormous bug with his little antennas and stuff. And I was like, no, 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 you cannot be here. You cannot be here. And I captured it, in like a jar of some sort and took it outside there's like a little trail here. So I took it to the trail. And I came back in the vihar and I thought, wow, this test of my metta right away, Test of my metta, test of my karuna, my equanimity, like all my Brahma viharas got tested right there, all in one shot, right? So just start with your intention, right? And really express that intention and strengthen that intention by using the recitation form. And it's lovely to do it first thing in the morning when you first wake up. It's also lovely to do it last thing in the evening. If you go to bed, if you go to sleep sort of in that mind state of thinking well and having these kind of pleasant thoughts, that's a very nice way to go. So I highly recommend it. And then you have the other form. You have the radiating, what's called the radiating form. And that is it's a visualization. And because my early training was in Zen Buddhism, I thought that visualizations were primarily associated with Vajrayana, with like Tibetan and Nepalese and Bhutanese Buddhism. But actually, there are quite a few types of visualization that are taught in early Buddhist discourses and in the Theravada specifically. And this is one of them, the Brahmaviharas. And so the instruction is, I will abide pervading the mind, the chitta, so mind, heart, all of the sort of cognitive experience, with loving kindness in one direction, 1/4, it says, so like 1/4 of space, in the second quarter, and the third quarter, and the fourth quarter, above and below. So it's an idea of the way I like to walk people through it is thinking of it as a light, or as being like waves of sound or waves of energy that are filling your body and then moving beyond the body and moving out just naturally as they do. That light energy just moves out in all the directions. And again, it sort of relates to this metaphor that the Buddha gave of metta as being like the sun at midday, this very, very bright light that's emanating in all directions, emanating everywhere. And then seeing it grow vast, right? So seeing that light really go as far as it can without pushing, without a sense of like straining, but seeing that the mind can become this very vast, boundless space. Metta can become truly like cosmic, vast. And you can experience the spaciousness of the mind through these kinds of practices. And it's very beautiful and is very helpful, because when you have that kind of spacious mind, then it's much easier to have equilibrium. Not much can set off balance a mind that is that vast, right? And it's also a little easier to develop some focus, because again, any kind of movement, small thoughts or things that might be coming through are tiny in comparison to the bigger space, this spacious experience of the mind. So for that reason also, then metta is also known as a good antidote to anger. So it's because it's creating this kind of mind that can deal with whatever kinds of unpleasantness might be coming up in a more spacious way. Yeah. So I want to give an example. And so the practice of metta, I would say, is it's very much, you could say it's sort of, rather than going directly at a response to fear or a response to anger. It's taking a much more generalized approach of sort of resetting or sort of establishing a different balance within the mind, different nature of mind altogether, at a different level, not directly going after specificity. And that's why the universal nature of it is also most important, right? Developing that big heart, big-heartedness, big-mindedness. And so I want to tell you a story, because one of the things that happens oftentimes for folks that practice metta is that you might feel like you're not sure whether you're seeing any difference. You're doing this, and and you might have a nice meditation, or you might be reciting every day for a while, and you're wondering, like, is this really helping? Is this really shifting my mind at all? And then you have some encounter and you see that, oh, you came from a very different place. And you didn't go directly to fear, you didn't go directly to anger. And so the example that I want to tell you about is also related to when I had first arrived here in DC. So that wasn't that long ago. It was July, a year and a half ago, July of 21. And I moved out here because my daughter lives here, also in Alexandria. And I literally had just driven cross country with my friend Terry. And Terry and I had taken the Vihara car from California, into Northern California, Sacramento area, and come on out all the way across the country in time to arrive here for the beginning of the rains retreat, the monastic summer period. And so Terry and I got here, and it was a weekend. And so my daughter Kayla said, well, let's go over to Eastern Market in DC. It'll be fun. The weather's, nice and warm. There's going to be all kinds of vendors out there. We can grab a bite to eat. And, you can get to know the city just a little bit, and we'll go over there. So we went to this place called Eastern Market, which is this outdoor, lots of different booths, people selling clothes and candles and African art and paintings and photographs and food of all sorts and T-shirts and whatnot. And so we had lunch. We were walking back toward the car, back through the market, and this gentleman approached me. And he was obviously a little upset. And he approached me and he started, I don't remember even exactly what his first few things were, but he was kind of asking some questions. He was really wanting to talk about justice, peace and justice for Black men like him. So that was kind of I don't remember the exact wording of his question, but his question was along the lines of, like, where is the peace and justice for Black people like me? And I said, well, what we see in the world is a set of conditions that fits together, and we have to find our own peace within that. And he said, well, what about the, shootings and the murders and the things that are happening right down the street here? And I said, just remember, the good Reverend Dr. King said, we have to stand in our places and be peace, even when it's not peaceful. And this man was getting a little bit agitated, and he leaned in very close to my face, and he said, the Reverend Doctor was shot in the head and no one heard him. Nobody heard him. And he was wincing. I could see, like, he was suffering even from his own words. Could see the pain in his face from even his own words. And in that moment, I said, I heard him. We heard him. And he stopped. He stopped and he took a step back and he said, yeah, we heard him. People of peace like you and me, we heard him. And then we went on, he asked my name and stuff, and I gave him my card and all that. I never heard from him again, nor have I ever seen him again. But it was a very, intimate interaction. It was a very close interaction. In fact, Terry was kind of standing closer. As he was getting closer and closer, Terry was standing closer and closer because she was feeling kind of fearful. And I didn't realize, I didn't think of this as a metta moment until later. But I realized later on reflection that that's exactly what it was. It was a metta moment. I didn't feel fearful and I didn't feel angry at the way he was behaving. I just saw that he was sincerely looking for peace, but he's looking for peace in the midst of a lot of suffering, in the midst of pain. And I could only wish him that peace that he's looking for. Could only wish him well-being and that peace that he's looking for. So I'm not special in that way. I'm not special. The reason I'm telling you this story is not to say that. Rather, the reason to tell you this story is because that is the power of metta. If I look back at the person that I was before I started practicing metta, would I have been able to have a conversation with him without being fearful and running away, or without getting angry and getting into some fight with him? I doubt it. But over the course of many, many, many years of metta practice, it just felt natural to come from that other place. That is the power of metta, to literally change the landscape of your mind. So to give you a different metaphor than the sun metaphor, for me, when I think about metta, I think about like rain falling on the mountains, rain falling on the mountain ranges over years, softening those landscapes, right? Easing those landscapes. Providing the nourishment. Literally changing the landscape of my mind. The reason why I started practicing metta was because I was a person who had a lot of anger. I went to my teacher. I just moved into San Francisco Zen Center in the year 2005. And I went to my teacher and I said, I wake up furious every morning. And I don't even have a reason. It's not about what I dreamt or my bed or the morning wake-up bell or what I have to do that day or something that happened to me in the past. I'm just carrying around this tremendous amount of anger. So things have changed. Things have changed. It has been a deeply transformative practice for me. And again, it was subtle. It's been subtle in many ways to see how metta changes me. Yeah. So I also see the benefit in my meditation. I think that when you practice metta over time, you see the benefit in your meditation. There's no question. And the relationship of that is that, as I said earlier, it's bringing up all of these very beautiful, wholesome qualities that we need, that are known as the factors for awakening. It's bringing up joy, right? It's bringing up a mind that's willing to stay because it's pleasant, it's joyful, it's bright. Mm. It's bringing up energy because, yes, right, it's beautiful. I'm willing to put the energy in. So this is such a beautiful practice, and one that has it, that will do its beautiful work on us. So I just want to say, I wish you all well. May you all be well. May you all find your own well of loving kindness, your own rain clouds, huge, big, fat raindrops of loving kindness. And may you just use those simple, simple moments of kindness in your life to foster that intention a little at a time, a little at a time. And one day you'll know, you'll see. Maybe you already have, for some of you who've been practicing it already, you'll see that the landscape of your mind is changed.